The famous psychiatrist M. Scott Peck wrote in his book on community building, community is and must be inclusive. The great enemy of community is exclusivity. Groups that exclude others because they are poor or doubters or divorced or sinners or of some different race or nationality are not communities, they are cliques, actually defensive bastions against community. Now this week we saw something in our country that I frankly never dreamed could be possible. The President of the United States was leading a throng of people in North Carolina in chanting, "Send her back," in reference to a black woman who is a democratically elected member of Congress.
And obviously and importantly, Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds.
Now, most of us have been highly critical of Trump since before he somehow managed to win the 2016 election, but it may not look like it to you, but I've tried to temper my criticisms and have tried to stay on the factual and sober side of the accusations that he was trying to take America down a path towards dictatorship or a lifetime presidency in some Nazi style of fascism. Now, there are a host of reasons to not like Donald Trump. In the famous recording from Access Hollywood, in which he described himself, admitted on tape, that he is a serial sexual assaulter and even a child sex criminal, that he bragged about going into the dressing room of teenage girls getting ready for the Miss Teen America contest. Add to that the suspicions of organized crime, money laundering, coordinating with foreign enemies to rig our elections, and obvious and certain obstruction of justice played out in real time on live television. But now the suggestion that both native-born brown and black women and legal immigrants from predominantly black and brown countries, which, let's be honest, I'm not going to edit myself here, he called shithole countries, that they should be exiled from America. This, I submit, is exactly what Hitler did. This is precisely the road that you follow towards fascism. Trump has crossed the Rubicon from mere conservative gaslighting and the blowing of racist and xenophobic dog whistles into dangerously anti-American, anti-democratic, full-on fascism. So yes, impeach him, force him to resign, arrest him for high crimes and misdemeanors against the office of the presidency and attacks on the constitutional government of the United States of America. But folks, at this moment, as we prepare to take communion here in our faith community, the real point is not simply that Donald Trump is the most dangerously narcissistic and anti-American president in the history of our nation. My concern at this moment is this. Trump is a miserable excuse for a human being who is unfit to hold elected office at any level. Someone who espouses the prejudices he claims shouldn't be allowed to sweep the floors in a courthouse. But it's not about one man. My concern is that 40% of America agrees with him. Probably everyone here has someone in your life that you've tried to stay in a relationship with in spite of the fact that they're one of these people. You go to family gatherings. You go to office events. You try to talk about sports, the weather, the new restaurant that just opened. You try to find something to talk about other than Donald Trump. We've tried to convince ourselves that Trump is a bad guy, but my brother, our old friends, our neighbors, our co-workers, they're not all just a basket of deplorables. We can say that people might support Trump because they couldn't stand Hillary Clinton, or they wanted to elect a change agent, but they're not bad people. But when you can be led in a chant to send her back because these members of Congress are doing exactly what their constituents elected them and sent them to Congress to do, then you have crossed the Rubicon with Trump. My concern is that Trump is not alone in these outrageous prejudices. He's just giving legitimacy to them. So literally, what are we to do? I agree with those who say that we must try to reunite our nation, that we need to find some way to heal the partisan divide and become one country again. I get the argument that just as we have managed to let go of our prejudices so that we are inclusive now of other races, other sexual orientations, other religions and nationalities, we also have to be inclusive of those with whom we have fundamental and serious disagreements. And I know that sounds right. I know that's where, as a spiritual community, that's where our hearts are. But I still have to offer a caveat. I'm a big fan of the community building writings of the famous psychiatrist M. Scott Peck, and he insists in his book, The Different Drum, that to build community, you have to be inclusive of everything except exclusivity. That is, you cannot be prejudiced about age, race, size, sexual orientation, nationality, politics, gender, class, or education. But for a community to exist, you cannot include someone who insists on exclusion. If someone in a community says, we're open to all people who are not black, or we are open to all people who are straight, then that person has to be excluded. If someone says you have to be a liberal, then even that, even for a church like ours, is unacceptable. But if someone says, why don't you just go back to the country where you're from? That person's a racist. And you cannot plaster a dung wall, if I may quote Confucius. Now, we're about to take communion here, which for us is not a sacrament, but rather it is a symbolic statement about community, that white, black, brown, gay, straight, men, women, gender nonconforming, people who wash their hands after they use the restroom, and people who don't, all get to come and eat at the same table. See, you didn't all know that you still had a prejudice, did you? See, we're either inclusive or we're not. But a community cannot survive if it includes people who insist that there are others who may not be a part of your community. So what do we do when very nearly half of our nation's adult population is willing to chant, send her back? Can we exclude nearly half of the civilization in which we live, who are admittedly without plausible defense? They have become truly deplorable people. And folks, this challenges everything I really and truly believe about spirituality and psychology, because typically I would say very emphatically that it's not up to us to change other people, that it's up to us to accept them. But in the face of exclusive prejudice, yeah, Trump is giving legitimacy to America's id, but we, my sisters and brothers, and I don't say that lightly or just because we're in a religious context, but we, ideologically, spiritually, we are sisters and brothers. We have to delegitimize prejudice. Trump is legitimizing it. We must be bold in delegitimizing it. Where I grew up, racism was just a part of the air we breathed. But eventually, it became socially unacceptable to be openly racist. It took years, but it eventually became unacceptable to be privately racist. And even though it still shows its ugly face in jokes and private messages, whenever a light is shined on it, until recently, people knew that they should be ashamed of it. More or less the same happened in the evolution of the open acceptance of people of varying sexual orientations or sexual nonconformity. Or gender nonconformity. It has taken years, but most mainstream churches now realize that Christianity is not superior to Judaism or Islam or Buddhism, and they just need to stop all that stuff about trying to convert people to see the world as they see it, but rather to try to learn from a diverse religious community. America has never gotten the whole thing about an inclusive community, a democratic, inclusive society, a melting pot, or a tossed salad. We've never gotten it just right, but we used to want to. You remember we wanted to create a more perfect union. My modest proposal is that we make that our goal again. We're not a perfect union, but we must strive to be a more perfect union, which means we need to be clear that it is unacceptable to be a misogynist, to be a racist, to be a xenophobe, or an Islamophobe, or a homophobe. It is unacceptable. And I think we need to be clear about it. The direction that Trump is pointing towards is evil, it is deplorable, and it is unacceptable. And the people in the MAGA hats, the people who attend the rallies and chant these fascist views, need to know that they are not innocent. They don't simply disagree with liberals. They are, in fact, championing the destruction of Western democracies in favor of prejudice, racism, hatred, and bigotry. And even those among our number with whom we share DNA, the ones we want to see during the holidays this fall, you have to understand that it is up to you to stop excluding others if you still want to be included in our lives. Before you walk down this aisle to participate in this symbolic community of communion, make a real and powerful decision to leave all of your prejudices and exclusionary sentiments behind and to never pick them up again.